Welcome to this talk, Evolving Real-World AsciiDoc into a Specification and How It Will Help the Ecosystem. My name is Alexander Schwartz, or just Alex. I'm working for Red Hat. At daytime, I'm working on the Keycloak project, which is about identifying and authorizing users. And in my spare time, I'm a maintainer in the AsciiDoc community, and AsciiDoc is the topic I'm about to talk today. So we are in a small room here. I'm happy to take questions during the talk. I think somebody will come to you with a microphone, and then let's make this interactive in this talk. All right, that's the next, 30-minute agenda. So I talk about the mission. The mission is to get documentation out to the readers, the workflow, how to achieve that, and how the tools in the AsciiDoc community will work together to achieve that. I talk about the AsciiDoc brand and what is happening at the Eclipse Foundation, and then finally about the AsciiDoc Language Specification. So that's the mission, right? Mission is getting the docs out to the readers, and the idea is, it's all about docs as code when you're talking about AsciiDoc, and the authors, they should focus on the content and the structure. So you're writing something for your end users, you're writing maybe a concept, maybe how to, all this documentation is written once in AsciiDoc, and the authors, they write the content, they don't really care where and how it is published. The conversion is then handling multiple targets for a single source. From the single source, like you can target a website with HTML, you can target an EPUB if you want to publish a book, or you can publish a PDF. All that's possible with the workflows that we support in AsciiDoc. And the published documentation, and that's the end goal, to educate the user, to provide answers to their questions. So this is the third step of the process, publishing it, because only then it's been found by users and can be used by the users. So let's dive a bit more deeper into all of these three steps, what AsciiDoc can already do today, what the ecosystem provides, and how it works. So as an author, you have like three steps. You write something, you validate what you've written by either reviewing other people's code. Maybe you have tools to validate the content you've written, and then review it, right? And there are lots of ways to do that. You can have a plain editor to write AsciiDoc. You have a full-fledged IDE, a browser, command line tools. So it's really a rich ecosystem where you choose the way you actually want to write content. And writing in an IDE looks like this. This is now a screenshot of an IntelliJ IDE with an AsciiDoc plugin installed. I happen to be the maintainer of the AsciiDoc plugin of IntelliJ. And, you get a familiar outline there, a familiar outline saying, okay, this is the outline of the IDE with a file tree. And on the right, you see an editor with some syntax highlighting, and this is basically AsciiDoc. And this AsciiDoc then has syntax highlighting. You can write there without opening any other tools. You don't open a full word processor. You're in your IDE as a developer and continue working there without being distracted. You have the syntax highlighting. You have auto-completion there. So in the documentation, you would reference images. You would reference other files. You would have links in there. All these links will be auto-completed and validated in your IDE. And depending on the IDE and the plugins you install, you might have also a grammar check for your native language in there and the style checker. For example, with IntelliJ, there comes the Grazi plugin, and this will do grammar checks in lots of languages. Me, as a foreign English speaker, I always love to have that in there to tell me my typo mistakes, my grammar mistakes, which is all embedded in the IDE. And then it feels like a word processor, but not with the word output into a Git repository. An IDE comes also with the feature of a preview. You can scroll there in the preview, you can link. It's maybe if you put a bit more time and point it to the right style, so it will be styled like the real content you're showing on your website. And you can collaborate with others using version control. Collaborating using version control is a key concept when you do documentation as code. You put all your content into a Git repository, maybe even the same Git repository, where you also put the software you're writing, and then the build process will produce an artifact from the code that you put into a Git repository, but also the live website with all its content from the Git repository. And it will be perfectly in sync with versioning around that. So how does AsciiDoc actually look like? Like on the left, you see always the text that you write in your editor, plain text, and on the right, you see the preview that matches it. So each sentence should be on a separate line. Every blank line creates a new paragraph. You can write bold text, italic text. It works like maybe these instant messaging apps that you have on your phone. It works pretty the same way. But I think probably the documentation as code, people have invented it first. So we have lists in there with numbers and with or without numbers. All that works, and you can move things around in an editor, and always in a Git version control system, see who has changed what kind of text at what time. That's the usual thing version control does. And if the person put a right link to an issue in there, you can even find out this sentence has been changed due to that issue somebody has been working on, and you can really track down why it has been changed. But it doesn't stop with the plain text. You can really have admonitions in here. You kind of pop-up paragraphs. You have examples. The thing is, AsciiDoc is about 15 years old now. It's inspired by DocBook, but without the XML, I'd say. It has all the features in there that you can actually write the content like you would write a book for, like, actually, I think there was a time, or maybe that still is, you can write a book in AsciiDoc and give it to O'Reilly and publish it as a book. And all these features you see in the book, these callouts, all of that is part of the native AsciiDoc syntax. And when you write documentation for your software, you will, I would say, never fall back to maybe writing some HTML in line with AsciiDoc. So it's really a complete syntax. You can even do tables. So the syntax on the left, maybe you get used to it a bit, but you can do titles on tables. You can have the columns of different sizes. You can have formatting in the cells. You can move them around. And the best practice is also to have like one cell is one line, so you can move them around simply without trying to reformat the table all the time. As probably a lot of software developers are around here, it's about embedding source code in your documentation as well. So the top example is the minimal example. You have a file, you point to the file and include everything in your documentation. But then usually you want to have only a snippet of the documentation, and you want to have a call out pointing to a specific point in your code. And this is where you add some more tags in here, like beginning and end of the standard output println, and you make the call out at the end as a comment in there in your code. And then you give it a bit more syntax, saying, okay, you want to include this example of that tag, and then you have this explanation, and it renders like the lower example here. So this really looks like a proper book, right? And this is how documentation should look like when you put in code. And it also saves you from the embarrassing situation that the code that you have in your examples doesn't compile. You took it from a real source code example, you test it in your build that it compiles, you have probably unit tests or maybe even integration tests testing it, and all the code that you have in your documentation compiles and actually works. What a nice thing to have. Once you've written that, you authored all the content, you want to also validate the contents. There are different tools out there. Sometimes the IDEs will do that for you, but there's also command line tools like Veil that help you there. And there are style guides written there, and what they can do, I can say, this is the Red Hat style guide, please use that to validate all the text that I have written. And then I can run it in my IDE, I can run it on my command line, I can also run it in a pull request. So my pull requests are automatically annotated whenever I violate the Red Hat style guide when it comes to it, or maybe have a grammar problem here, or doing too much passive voice, something that's haunting me always when I'm writing documentation. And now you see, like, I have my IDE, I want to create the preview, I want to have syntax highlighting, I want to have other tools to read that content and validate it. They all integrate with the syntax of AsciiDoc. And at the moment, AsciiDoc is driven by its implementations, and so I'd say it's a de facto standard. All these tools already integrate quite well, but they could even integrate better when we would have a real specification. And this is what we will show about in the later step. So when you want to convert this AsciiDoc content that we just written, you can really choose what do I want to convert it to, HTML, PDF, or DocBook. What tool do I want to use, Maven, NPM, or command line? if I want to, which kind of library or tool do I want to use to convert it with? Do I want to use AsciiDoctor, which is available on Ruby, JavaScript, and Java? Do I want to use libAsciiDoc if I'm maybe a Go programmer and want to integrate it in my build process using Go? Or maybe a Haskell implementation. So all these implementations are already there, and well, they need to do the same things to the AsciiDoc stores, right? And you want to really ensure, as a user who's writing their content in AsciiDoc, you want to be sure that you can pick any of the tools of your preference, and they should interpret or parse the AsciiDoc that are written in the same way. And this is what the specification is about then. And when I convert these things, it works. It can be on a command line. On the top left, you see AsciiDoctor command line tool here, which then also put out some warnings saying, okay, maybe the syntax is a bit off here because multiple IDs are detected. When I do a style attribute, it should be only one. Or I want to embed it into a website. I want to have a minimal editor, maybe as a web content management system. And we have a very similar editor like this in the AsciiDoc.org website. So you can here go to the AsciiDoc.org website and really do some typing here. And when I do some typing, the preview will work. It will work like in an IDE, and it's very lightweight, or at least lightweight enough to embed it in the browser and do the typing here. And it works almost like the IDE, but without the linking. And well, this preview here doesn't have a save button. If you go to an IDE, it will have the same here. I can really go in here, type, and the preview will update. Here you see the prerequisites. When I'm typing here, on the right you will see that it's updating synchronously. I can do the linking, go to another page. Having links here that also show up here. I can look. So everything works here. Maybe I should have looked up an example that has also an image. Okay, yeah, this is a node. So this will look like on the real website for me. So this is my IDE. So this is how tools should work in an IDE. And all this embedding is then, it's more a matter of the implementation, and depending on which environment I'm in, I might choose a different implementation because it allows better embedding, better integration on my command line, better integration in my CI/CD process. There are also extensions that interact on a structural level with AsciiDoc. Again, this is about syntax and how the abstract syntax tree of AsciiDoc behaves, right? At the moment, all of these implementations, like the AsciiDoctor implementation that then does the conversion, it comes with its own extension API. But what this extension API, what you can do with it, you can structurally modify the AsciiDoc content that somebody else has written before during the conversion process. So you can add a paragraph, add a section, have your own macros in there. And this interaction with AsciiDoc will happen on the AST level. So you can write an extension to AsciiDoc for the AsciiDoctor implementation. That will, modify the content on the fly when you build it and convert it to the output format. But this extension doesn't need to know if it's been converted to PDF, to HTML, or something else. So that's really cool because it's then, say, output neutral, the extension that you're writing. You can, of course, write extensions that are not neutral to the output, but that I would recommend doing this in a neutral way. And finally, you can say, I want to publish it, as I said, and there are lots of static site publishers I've chosen here. You can go for Hugo, Hugo being a static site publisher written in Go. And for example, the AsciiDoc Working Group website is built using Hugo. And of course, as the AsciiDoc Working Group, we're writing the content on our website in AsciiDoc. It's written in a Git, it's committed to a Git repository, automatically built. And what Hugo then does, it will call the AsciiDoctor command line to convert it to HTML and then place it in the right places when it's been converted for the UI. There's Antora, a static site publisher focused only on AsciiDoc content, and that will give a lot of structure around it when you publish end-user material. And there's JBake around for people looking for content management based on Java in a way. There's also Jekyll supporting AsciiDoc, and 11t also has a module to convert AsciiDoc on the fly when you build your 11t site. Actually, 11t is used on the AsciiDoc.org website that the AsciiDoc Working Group has prepared, so also to convert there the content we're writing there. Let's have a closer look at the Antora static site publisher, because that's focusing on AsciiDoc and can really show how you can write or how you can publish in the end your end user documentation. So this is an Antora website for the Antora documentation. Eat your own dog food. And yeah, you see this static website comes with some HTML output that you can put on any web server, which is there for users to browse. You can have a fully automated publishing. You can customize the themes. You have a navigation outline here on the left. You have a site search here. You can also choose which version of the software you're looking at, especially like if you're documenting software, the documentation you write will match a specific version of your software, and you can really mirror that on your documentation website when you use AsciiDoc. So you go to the website, you probably land on the very latest version of the software documentation, and then you can switch, okay, but I'm not using the very latest version, so I switch another one here, or I want to go to the preview version, so I can basically switch back and forth between the versions. And Antora will also make sure that if you rename a page, that you'll be redirected to the right place with that very recent version of the software. So that's the one part. You also have a page outline, as people expect. You also can link all the pages. And something you also have is like edit this page. So the theme, you click there, you're redirected to wherever you host your docs. If you're an open source project, if you're a GitHub project, you link to GitHub. If you're a GitLab project, you get to GitLab. And people can start, do small changes there, press the save or commit button, and then create a small pull request fixing the docs where they think they need to be fixed. So that's Antora. And when you want to really get into this documentation as code world, usually there are some roles and responsibility how to set up such a project. You have some people authoring the content, and they create content. They create AsciiDoc files, like we saw them on the previous slide, basically writing plain text and committing it to the Git repository. And Antora comes with a, I say, opinionated file layout. So you can place it anywhere in the Git repository. It doesn't need to be on the root, but just anywhere. You need to have a folder for each component of a documentation where you have a well-defined structure, like where you want to put the images, where you want to have the examples, where are the actual pages you want to publish. All of that is in a well-defined structure. Like if you've worked in one Antora project, you will find your way in another Antora project immediately. If you do that, I think it bakes in a lot of best practices. If you worked with AsciiDoc before in a non-Antora environment, usually people put the images in lots of different places in different projects, and that can be a tedious task to find out how it's actually working. So then somebody takes this things committed into Git to prepare some automation scripts for validation and publishing. So that needs a different set of skills. It might be the same person, but it's a different set of skills. So some GitHub action automation, adding maybe Veil in the right place, preparing the dependencies using a package JSON, something like this, and a web developer who customizes the UI theme for you. So that's all the steps that we had for authoring, converting, and publishing, and that's how you see how all these tools work together, how they exchange maybe a converted path. HTML is then part of a static website being published. You wrote some content in an IDE, committed it to Git. You generated a preview, all this, yeah. And this needs to be, well, I'd say well adjusted, and so that you really can exchange the tools or upgrade tools, or without breaking your whole process that you set up there. Because automation is king, and automation is where Docs as Code really, really shines. So AsciiDoc brand and language documentation. So that's where the AsciiDoc Working Group has started. So AsciiDoc and the AsciiDoc language are now trademarks of the Eclipse Foundation, so all that legal stuff has been done. There's now the nice logo here, and I do have stickers with me. If you fancy a sticker of AsciiDoc later on, come to me with a red hat, and I'm happy to hand out some stickers. There's also some branding guidelines which fonts to use, so basically use the fonts I'm using in this presentation here, and then you're fine. But also like some legal stuff. So that's the brand, and it's great to really have an AsciiDoc logo here. So there's also a website, the AsciiDoc website, AsciiDoc.org. It used to host the Python implementation of AsciiDoc, and it's really now an implementation-neutral website talking about AsciiDoc, comparing different approaches to Docs code, linking to the specification, linking to tools. So this is the central place where you can start with learning about AsciiDoc and also having this example editor I've shown in the past. So there it is. So this is the website. Yeah, basically showing examples, showing also the AsciiDoc plugin here. All the companies who are in there, you can start with just READMEs, you can write books using AsciiDoc. People have shown to do a lot of things with AsciiDoc. We also compare it to other markup languages. Right. There's also the AsciiDoc language documentation that we published as the AsciiDoc Working Group. So that's a really vendor-neutral, implementation-neutral end-user guide to explaining all the concepts as a reference guide to end users writing AsciiDoc content, how to do paragraphs, sections, linking, breaks, whatnot. It's all in there. It's a great source to get started. And the other thing we are working on is then the AsciiDoc language specification. Well, it's not meant for end users, but it's meant for those developing tools, because these tools that I showed you before, like how to validate AsciiDoc content, how to do syntax highlighting in an editor, how to prepare a preview from something that has been written in the editor, how to take the output and integrate that into a website. Well, maybe not the last part, but the previous part, it's all about like parsing the AsciiDoc syntax in a sensible and common manner, and this is what the AsciiDoc language specification is then about. So there's a lot of discussion going on. So if you're an existing user of AsciiDoc, please join this discussion to really describing how the syntax should work using a formal grammar. And then the tool developers will benefit from that. Together with that specification in the second repository, we are also developing a TCK, a compatibility toolkit, where the different implementation can really check if they can parse the same content in the same semantical manner. Basically, a very minimal document here with a title and a small body will create a long JSON. But then if the implementation can check, okay, is it parsing in the same way? And you find in here things like the location of the line and really at which column of the line this is starting, this text. So this is really important because, like, for example, Whale as validating the content or a grammar checker, it will really want to know, okay, this is a title. There are specific rules only applied to a title. For example, how should capitalization work in a title? This tool will not want to know about this equal sign at the beginning, because the equal sign is not part of the text, it's not part of spelling, right? So you want to get only this bit document title in there. And so this parsing is really important to get things right and in a consistent in these different setups. So these are the links about the tools I presented today. It's about AsciiDoc, all the language and how you write it, all the syntax. AsciiDoc being one of the implementations. The AsciiDoc IntelliJ plugin, also with a link to get started. Antora static site publisher and some more videos. The slides are already online. Please give them a go and reach out to me with any questions you have. Thank you very much, and thanks for being here. So questions? Yeah.
You talked about extensions, and I looked into that at some point of time, but I must admit Ruby was not my kind of code. So do you think there will be something that allows to do that in other languages in the future? Maybe having a totally new, complete implementation if there is a specification?
Yeah. So I'd say for these extensions are really specific to the implementation you're using to converting AsciiDoc. At the moment, I can't imagine a vendor or an implementation neutral API for writing extensions, at least not today. AsciiDoc supports Ruby if you write it. If you're running it on Java, you can also write your extensions in Java. And if you're running AsciiDoc in JavaScript, you can write your extension on JavaScript. That makes at least 3 languages to choose from, but it then needs to be the same language you're running AsciiDoc on. So you have a bit of choice today, I'd say. Good.
Yeah, thank you. I have 3 questions. First, do you have a plugin for Eclipse Thea for AsciiDoc?
There's Eclipse IDE plugin, but probably none for Thea, or I'm not aware of. I probably have to look it up, but not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
But there's one for Visual Studio if you were asking for plugins of other IDEs, and there's now a standalone AsciiDoc editor called AsciiDoc, but that's only available on Mac, I believe, at the moment. So there are lots of editors with similar features around.
Yeah, so it would be nice to have maybe an AsciiDoc plugin directly in Eclipse Thea IDE because it's an Eclipse technology. Then
right.
Why not?
Yeah.
Then the second thing is, do you intend to include in AsciiDoc some form of writing diagrams? Like there's PlantUML, there is Mermaid, and a couple of other things, but there is not a single markup language which can do this out of the box. And it would be really nice if I can write my documentation and then also write my UML diagram or my flow diagram or whatever. That would make my life a lot easier.
So sadly, I removed this slide here. So there's one. The AsciiDoc syntax allows you to, well, the AsciiDoc implementation has extensions that allow you to do diagrams as code as well. So as you said, there's no standard there. There are lots of diagrams as code. And the good news might be, but maybe not the news you asked for, is you can use this ecosystem of diagrams as code, and there's AsciiDoc diagram as an adapter that allows you to do PlantUML, Mermaid, and a lot of others to integrate it into your AsciiDoc documentation already today.
Okay, but you don't have any plans to actually extend the specification to include us?
No, we don't plan to do that.
Okay, and then maybe a more implementation or like how to write things. How do you properly do citations in AsciiDoc? And especially when you want to have like a bibliography and some sort of...
Yeah, there is an extension for that.
Okay, there's an extension, but it's not included in the language itself.
Not today. So there's AsciiDoc bibtex, I think, whatever.
Yeah.
So this will allow you to do the citations in an AsciiDoc style way. And then you have your database in a way, text file with all the citations that you can reference to. And that's, like, I say it works today. If you would like to make that, today is an extension to AsciiDoc. If you say that should be part of the specification, join the discussion, let's say,
okay.
And ask for it. When we do this specification today, we try to make it, I'd say, well, we want to make the specification compatible with existing implementations as much as possible, and supporting any well-formed AsciiDoc that has been written in the past to be compliant with or being good with that specification we come up with. So if we say bibtex implementation is a sane implementation in a way, then there's no problem to make that part of a specification eventually. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Any more questions? Otherwise, yeah, there's one more. Anyone after him with more questions? Okay. Okay.
You showed that the AsciiDoc documentation for the syntax still lives on the AsciiDoc side, if I got it right. are there plans to move that, and what do the people doing the implementation and caring about AsciiDoc think about that?
Yeah. Okay, so Dan Lennon is one of the driver behind that implementation of AsciiDoc, and he and the other contributors to AsciiDoc put a great effort into separating this language guide from the implementation. So they're perfectly fine with that, and they're also part of the working group. And like, even though the URL currently points to the AsciiDoc.org website, the Git repository already moved to the Eclipse Foundation. So the sources are at Eclipse, and all the contributions to that are governed by Eclipse laws, I'd say. So with Eclipse contributor, you're good to contribute there as well.
A quick question. Assuming I want to have snippets of AsciiDoc in my application, use case is like for Markdown, transforming Markdown to HTML to embed it into a web page interactively somehow. Is there something similar for AsciiDoc where there's an implementation for, let's say, Rust, which I would be interested in, that just takes a snippet of AsciiDoc, renders that as HTML, and then so I can embed it?
Yeah. So at the moment, I'm not aware of a Rust implementation. I have to look it up. So at the moment, I think one of the popular ones is then AsciiDoc being Java, Ruby, and JavaScript, and Go and Haskell. Calling an external program is sometimes not the thing you want. I understand that. So you probably need to then take a language specification and write your own parser to do that. So let's ask Google later to find if there's a Rust implementation. Good. Final question? All right. Thanks for joining. Have a great day here at OCX.